Good morning and welcome to Gospel Baptist Church Sunday School class. We are in the book of Numbers and we're going through our series on prayer, and we're looking at prayers in the Bible from the book of Moses. So let's consider what we went through so far. We talked about Moses' prayer for Israel's protection, and as they moved forward he prayed for God to go with them. Of course there's the prayer of Aaron before that, but that's another presentation. And then he prayed, as they moved forward he prayed that the enemies would retreat, and then he also prayed that they'd know that God was with them. That was his prayer for Israel's protection, a good prayer. Then we saw his complaint against Israel. That was another prayer. The people wept out of anger, and Moses also responded in frustration and anger. Could they not be satisfied with what God had already given them and with the manna? But they wanted some meat, and Moses was overwhelmed by his circumstances, and he cried out to God, and he says, I wish I was never been born, type of a thing, take my life, And then the Lord responded by raising up support, and that support was 70 elders. And then also the Lord responded by answering their cries and giving them quail to eat. So God is so gracious. And then it was interesting the way the Bible expresses it. He said, I give you so much quail, I'm going to give you for a whole month until it comes out of your nostrils. That's quite expressive. Anyway, and then finally Moses was still struggling. And then we saw last week Moses' prayer for Miriam. Miriam rose up with Aaron against her brother, and Moses faced criticism from those closest to him. That's tough. In their criticism, they tore down Moses' authority, and because of this Ethiopian woman that he married. Again, we couldn't really see what the problem was, other than that they were thinking that he wasn't one of their own. But if she converted, then what's the problem? So really, we're not sure why they were criticizing Moses, but they found a reason. People always find a reason to criticize. Anyway, they allowed the Lord to defend him. Allowed the Lord to defend him. And the Lord angrily confronted Miriam and Aaron, and Miriam ended up with leprosy and a debilitating terminal disease. But what did Moses do? He went to the Lord in prayer. Aaron repented of tearing down Moses, and then Moses interceded for his sister, and she had to be outside the camp for a week. Then the Lord healed her. Today, of course, the Lord answered, but wanted her to remember her shame. Okay, but today we're going to talk about Moses' prayer for justice. We're in Numbers chapter 16. We look at Moses' prayer for justice. I'll just read the one verse, then we'll go to the Lord in prayer. And Moses was very wroth, and said unto the Lord, respect not thou their offering. I have not taken one ass from them, neither have I hurt one of them. Let's go to the Lord. Father in heaven, I pray as we look at this scripture and understand it, I pray it help us to understand the word of God better. Help us know how to deal with conflict. Help us learn from Moses. Thank you, Lord Jesus, as he prayed for justice, that we can learn that vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. I will repay, and we can leave things into your hands instead of trying to take things into our own hands. It only makes things worse. Would you bless and help us to learn from Moses in Jesus' precious name. Amen. Okay, so first thing we see here is Korah and his friends rose up in rebellion against Moses. Verse 1. Now Korah, we're in Numbers 16. Now Korah, the son of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levite, and Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab and On, the sons of Peleth, sons of Reuben, took men, and they rose up before Moses with certain of the children of Israel, 250 princes of the assembly, famous in the congregation, men of renown. So we see Korah and his friends rose up in rebellion against Moses. Now let's consider who they were. Korah was a Levite, so he was the right tribe, but Dathan and Abiram were Reubenites, and they felt entitled to rebel against God's God-given authority. They felt that there was safety in numbers, and they led a good crowd into their rebellion. Rebels thrive on being able to gather a crowd. Rebels thrive, the saying is true, wickedness reigns when good men do nothing. And rebels thrive when they can gather a crowd. You know what? When rebels start to garner a crowd, they get the sympathy of the crowd. But you know what? If they didn't garner any support in the first place, if there was people with enough courage around them to say, what are you talking about? They wouldn't have garnered their support in the first place. But good men said nothing. Moses was left on his own. And Korah and his friend rose up in rebellion against Moses. But they falsely insinuated that Moses was suppressing them. Look at verse 3. And they gathered themselves together against Moses and against Aaron, and said unto them, Ye take too much upon you, seeing all the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Wherefore then lift ye up yourselves above the congregation of the Lord. You know that phrase, why are you lifting yourself up above everyone else, is like saying, why are you putting us down? Because when people lift up themselves, they're lifting themselves up to put other people down. When people put other people down, they're putting them down so they can lift themselves up. So they were falsely insinuating that Moses was suppressing them. Somehow they missed that Moses shared his leadership with the 70. We saw that last time. Look at chapter 11. Go back a few pages to chapter 11, verse 16 and 17. And the Lord said unto Moses, Gather unto me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom thou knowest to be the elders of the people, and officers over them, and bring them unto the tabernacle of the congregation, that they may stand there with thee. And I will come down and talk with thee there, and I will take of the Spirit which is upon them, and I will put it upon them, the Spirit is upon thee, put it upon them, and they shall bear the burden of the people with thee. So it wasn't just Moses. So when Dathan and Abiram and Korah were saying, you take too much upon yourself, Moses, really, they weren't just speaking against Moses, they were speaking against the whole authority structure, because Moses shared the responsibility and he shared the burden with the 70. Because it says, and thou shalt not bear it thyself alone. Moses wasn't bearing it on his own. So there was a lot of false accusations there. They missed that Moses was sharing his leadership with others. And though holy, Israel was holy, this was another one of their accusations, that the congregation is holy. Though Israel was holy, it was the presence of the Lord that made them holy. You know, the Jews during Jesus' day had it wrong. They said, if you swear by the temple, it's nothing, but if you swear by the gold that's in the temple, then you're held to your word. And Jesus said, you hypocrite! What's it that makes the gold holy? Is it not the temple that makes the gold holy? And they would make all these statements. Israel was only holy because the presence of the Lord made them holy. And though Israel was holy, I made that statement, and it was the prayers of Moses that God would dwell among them. God wanted to dwell among his people, and Moses prayed that way. So if you look at it this way, Moses was praying for the holiness of Israel. Moses was praying that God would bless Israel with his holiness. And this was one of the accusations that Dathan and Abiram and Korah were levying against Moses. The congregation is holy. Moses was probably thinking, I know they're holy. I'm praying for their holiness. But while they falsely accused Moses of lifting himself above the rest, they had no idea how many times Moses had fallen on the ground for them. Moses had fallen on the ground. Exodus chapter 32. Exodus chapter 32. Exodus chapter 32. Look at verse 31 and 32. Moses fell on the ground again and again. Exodus 32, verse 31 and 32. And Moses returned unto the Lord and said, Oh, this people have sinned a great sin, and have made them gods of gold. And now if thou wilt forgive their sin, and if not, blot me, I pray thee, out of thy book, which thou hast written. Where was Moses? He was on his face before God. He was on his face before God. Numbers chapter 20. Numbers chapter 20. Now again, this is future tense for Israel, but it was just a pattern for Moses. Numbers chapter 20, verses 3 to 6. This is ahead of our text this morning, but you get the point. This is Moses. Numbers 20, verse 3 to 6. And the people chode with Moses and spake, saying, Would God that we had died when our brethren died before the Lord. Why have ye brought up the congregation of the Lord into the wilderness, that we and our cattle should die there? And wherefore have ye made us to come out of Egypt, to bring us into this evil place? It is no place of seed or figs or vines or pomegranates, neither is there any water to drink. And Moses and Aaron, what did they do? They went from the presence of the assembly onto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and they fell upon their faces. And this is what Moses did. He would constantly pray for his people, and he'd fall on his faces before God for his people. And here's Dathan and Abiram and Korah saying, You lift yourselves up. I mean, what planet are they on? And I'm not trying to be unkind there, but what planet are they on? Are they not looking around them? You know, sometimes when people criticize and complain all the time, now there are just criticisms, we understand that. But there are some, all they want to do is criticize and complain. You ever notice, and the same things that they accuse you of are the things they're doing themselves. Moses, why are you lifting yourself up against the congregation, above the congregation? What were they doing? Lifting themselves up. But they were missing the fact that Moses was falling on his face before the congregation, before the Lord, praying for them. How could they miss that? Because they didn't want to see. You know, some people only see what they want to see. Isn't that true? And that's why they end up criticizing the wrong people. Now, there are times when we have to acknowledge things are wrong and just say, this is not right. Right is always right. Wrong is always wrong. This doesn't fall in that category. I think we all understand that. Moses was being falsely accused. And so he's praying for justice. He was going to go before the Lord and pray for justice. Let's go back to Numbers chapter 16. So what's his response? Again, Moses-like. Numbers chapter 16, Numbers 16, verse 4. And when Moses heard it, what did he hear? The criticism against him, the unjust criticism against him, he fell upon his face. That's what he did. That's what he's used to doing. He fell on his face before the Lord, because that's Moses. He fell on his face before God. But after that, you know, when David ran into problems, he would fall on his face before the Lord. But there was a difference between Moses and David. Moses dealt with the problem. Sometimes we can face problems and we can go to the Lord in prayer, and we can pray and pray and pray. But then the Lord is like, well, what are you doing about it? You know? You've got to deal with issues. You can't. Sometimes we want to sit back and just let God do it all, you know? And we call that faith. But it can also be, on our part, lethargy, where we're being lethargic and we're not doing anything. No, sometimes God just wants us to do something about this. So it's not just about praying about it. We've got to do something. So Moses had to do the difficult thing. He had to confront the rebellion. Look at verse 5. And he spake unto Korah. He spake unto Korah and unto all his company, saying, even tomorrow the Lord will show who are his and who is holy, and will cause him to come near unto him. Even him whom he hath chosen will he cause to come near unto him. This do, take ye censers, Korah, and all his company, and put fire therein, and put incense in them before the Lord tomorrow. And it shall be that the man whom the Lord doth chose, he shall be holy. And he goes on and says some more things. So he confronts their rebellion. Brethren, rebellion must be confronted. When people lift themselves up against authority for no just cause, only to lift themselves up because they think they can do a better job, or because they're critical of how things are being done, and you know, if I was in charge, I'd do this and I'd do this. Do you remember Absalom? Do you remember Absalom did that to David? If only I were king, I would do this and this. Lifting himself up against the authority God had placed there. Rebellion has to be confronted, because if you don't confront rebels, they will garner a crowd. Because rebels are very good with their speech. Sometimes leaders are not very good with their speeches, but rebels seem to be always good with their speech. And rebellion must be confronted. If you don't confront it, it will do untold damage. Isn't that what Joab said to David? David, we need to do something about this. If we don't allow, if we wait too long, if we allow Amasa more time, Amasa will garner all Israel against you. We have to deal with it quickly. That's what Joab said to David when Amasa lifted himself up against David. You know, David allowed Absalom back into his kingdom after murdering his brother. That's Absalom's brother, David's son. And Absalom went for the throne and wanted David, his father, dead. You know, that's because David allowed a rebel back into his kingdom. And Moses, in contrast, carefully protected the sheep. Sometimes we think we're being meek by not doing something about a problem, but that's not being meek, it's being weak. We've got to know the deep difference between meekness and weakness. Moses was meek above all the men that were upon the earth, but that doesn't mean he didn't deal with problems. It just meant that he didn't bulldoze over everybody. He wasn't like a bull in a china shop going after people. He was controlled. We'll talk about that in the main service. But that doesn't mean you don't deal with rebellion. You've got to deal with problems, because unfortunately they don't go away. Oh, it'd be so wonderful. Just oh Lord, here's the problem, I'm just going to go to my prayer room, I'm just going to pray about it, and it'll all be fixed when I come out of my prayer room. I'd love that, you'd love that, but that's not life. Sometimes we just have to deal with problems as much as we don't want to. Sometimes we have to confront people as much as we don't want to. Sometimes we have to confront issues as much as we don't want to. And when you confront people, you want them to respond the right way. But rebels never respond the right way because they're rebels. You know, if they weren't rebels, they wouldn't have done it in the first place. When you confront a rebel, they get in your face and they cause trouble. But if you confront them the right way, they back down because you've got to lead. I find it interesting at the end of verse 7. Korah and his cohorts are accusing Moses of taking too much upon himself. I love this in verse 7. Moses responds back to Korah. The end of verse 7, ye take too much upon you, ye sons of Levi. You know, you're the ones that are taking too much upon you. He just turns it back on him. He's confronting their rebellion. He's turning their wicked words against them, back on them. And then he exposes them. You've got to expose the rebel. When a rebel is trying to tear down authority, and you know, sometimes you think, oh, well, maybe he'd do a better job leading, and but you know what? Rebels never do a good job leading. A rebel could be a better speaker. A rebel could have better leadership qualities. A rebel could have greater ideas and better ideas. A rebel could be more organized. A rebel could be better with people and have more charisma about them. But a rebel is a rebel, and a rebel will always destroy the work of God. So rebels, even if the leader is just way under par compared to the rebel, rebels have to go. They'll only do damage. Because their end is rebellion. Their motive is rebellion. It's all about rebellion for them, not of God. Verse 8, and Moses said unto Korah, hear I pray you, ye sons of Levi. Seemeth it but a small thing unto you that the God of Israel hath separated you from the congregation of Israel, to bring you near to himself, to do the service of the tabernacle of the Lord, and to stand before the congregation to minister unto them. So Moses is saying, look what God has done for you. You despise what God has done for you. Verse 10, and he hath brought thee near to him, and all thy brethren, the sons of Levi, with thee, and seek ye the priesthood also. He says, you're not satisfied with what God has done. See, that's the thing about a rebel. They're always critical. Always critical. They're not satisfied with what they have. They're not thankful for what they have. They're always looking at what they don't have and going on and on about what they don't have. That's actually what we're going to talk about a little bit this morning. It's not the main thrust of it, but we're going to talk about it a little bit. But rebel, that's a rebel. A rebel just is never satisfied. And rebels have to be confronted. Moses had to confront them. Everybody needed to see who they were and what they were about. And then you have to do it God's way. Moses didn't go in there like a bull and say, I'll take you on. You know, he didn't do that. Moses went before the Lord. He fell on his face before the Lord. And then the Lord gave him the courage and the wisdom and the grace to do it God's way. But the rebellion had to be confronted. And you know what? Moses took the attention off himself and put it back to the Lord. You know, Korah, that's what rebels do. They make it all man-centered. I was reading my Bible in John chapter 1 this morning. It was amazing. And it's when you read it slowly, it is tremendous. The religious leaders came from the Pharisees to John the Baptist. And they said, who are you? You're baptizing in the wilderness. Who are you? And he just says, I'm a voice. And there's one greater than me coming. I'm not worthy to unloose his sandals. John didn't talk about what college he went to. He didn't talk about his credentials. He didn't talk about his right to preach. He didn't talk about who many people were in his congregation. He just talked about Jesus. Don't you love that? John didn't draw attention to himself. John drew attention to the Lord. Because that's what a true leader does. And I know leaders sometimes draw attention to themselves, but it's not right, is it? We all know it's not right. It's a human frailty and a human failure. Moses brought the attention back to the Lord. Look at verse 11. For which cause both thou and all thy company are gathered together against the Lord? And what is Aaron that ye murmur against him? I mean, who are we? We're nobody. Why are you complaining about us? Who are we? So whether rebellion and affliction or opposition comes from family members or any other source, do not take rebellion personally. Do not say, oh, you hurt my feelings. How could you do that to me? I mean, who put you in the position of authority in the first place? Wasn't the Lord? Rebellion is not against human beings. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. Rebellion is against God. Put it back where it belongs. It's the Lord. It's the Lord. You're rebelling against the Lord. That's why you're rebelling, child. O daughter of mine, O son of mine. You're giving me trouble and you're rebelling. You're not rebelling against me. You're rebelling against the Lord. You need to get right with God. That puts a different perspective on parenting, doesn't it? Because that's what rebellion is. Don't take it personally. Or whoever you're in charge of. Rebellion is against God. So don't get offended as if it was against you. It is not about us. It never was. It never will be. It's all about Jesus. Isn't that right? So he confronted the rebellion because he realized that ultimately rebellion is against God. Moses was a great leader. What an example to follow. Then Dathan and Abiram tried to make themselves victims. They did the victim mentality now. Oh, poor us. Look at verse 12. Because they know they're losing now. They're running out of good words. They're being exposed. And Moses sent to call Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, which said, we will not come up, rebels. Right? Is it a small thing that thou hast brought us up out of a land that flowed with milk and honey? I mean, that's wicked. They're saying that Egypt was a land flowing with milk and honey. No, it wasn't. They turned the whole thing, rebels turned everything around. Israel is the land of flowing with milk and honey. They turned the whole thing around to kill us in the wilderness. Except thou makest thyself altogether a prince over us. Moreover, thou hast not brought us into a land that floweth with milk and honey, or given us inheritance of fields and vineyards. Wilt thou put out the eyes of these men? We will not come up. I mean, poor us. You're just trying to hurt us. You're just trying to hurt our feelings. They're doing the victim mentality. Watch out for that. Do not, brethren, please. We need to learn to stop pitying people. When we're disciplining our children and they start poor me thing, don't give in. Don't give in. Self-pity is a sin. Self-pity in a child will grow up into adulthood. They'll have a spirit of bitterness and they'll always feel sorry for themselves. Never allow your children to feel sorry for themselves. That's one of the rules in our home. You are not allowed. Change that face. I don't want to see that face on you. I don't want to see you until you're smiling again. And it doesn't take long. It doesn't take long until they start smiling again. Because, children should never be allowed to feel sorry for themselves. Because it's rebellion. It's rebellion when they go around with a long face on them. And that happens in children, but it happens in adults. And they, oh, poor me. Life has dealt me such a hard blow. I mean, nobody said life is easy. But that spirit of rebellion, they use it, they twist it, and they connive it, and they turn it around. So they made themselves victims. They instigated the problem, and then they created the conflict, and then they turned it around and blamed Moses. Isn't that interesting? That they should have been politicians. Or maybe they should have worked for fake news media. Same thing. That's what they do. They create the problem, and then they turn around and blame somebody else. Wow. But brethren, good men can see right through them. And you know what? Moses understandably was angry. And I know you shouldn't get angry, but you can understand, humanly speaking. If I was there, I would have lost a rag. I know I would have, and maybe you would have too. Look at verse 15. It says here, and Moses was very wroth and said unto the Lord, respect not the offering. I have not taken one ass from them. I haven't taken any of their goods. I haven't taken any of their possessions. Neither have I hurt one of them. They're making these false accusations. Lord, look at this. So Moses is asking God to judge this. Now Moses did not pray for their destruction. He didn't pray for their vengeance. He just prayed that God would not let this go. He just prayed that their rebellion would not prosper, because when rebellion seems to get the okay, people always get hurt. Never want rebellion to go forward. When I see rebellion in groups, it grieves me, and I'm sure you're the same. I won't put up with it. Do you know why? Because it's not about me. It never was. And I hope you feel the same way. I won't put up with it because I can see the damage it does to a lot of people. Innocent people get hurt when rebels prosper. And it's not an option. It's just not an option. So get it out of your home. Get it out of your life. your societies, whatever you're in, you just deal with problems. And I thank God for people in Gospel Baptist Church over the years who have confronted rebels and said, that doesn't fly in this church. And they might as well have said, it might have been okay where you were before, but it doesn't work okay here. Because it doesn't. And I thank God, because of God's faithful people, rebels don't hang around in Gospel Baptist Church. And that's, and our faithful people who don't put up with nonsense, it's not about them, it's not about the pastor, it's about the Lord, it's about His church, it's about protecting people. You've got to protect people. Who wants the innocent getting hurt? It's not fair on the innocent. So Moses was angry. And as if he had to, Moses reminded the Lord that these charges were false. Lord, you know I haven't taken one thing of them. So what did God do? God answered the prayer His way. Now, we don't have time for it, but very, very quickly, I'm just going to quickly read it. I've got 1 minute left. And Korah gathered all the congregation against them unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and the glory appeared unto all the congregation. So Korah stirred the whole congregation up against Moses, and the Lord said, okay, I'm ready for this. Verse 20, separate yourselves from among this congregation, that I may consume them in the moment, the Lord says. I'm going to destroy everybody. And as the Lord said that to Moses and Aaron, verse 20. Verse 22, Moses and Aaron did what they usually do. They fell on their faces and said, oh God, the God of the Spirit of all flesh, these are sheep. I know they're foolish to follow Korah, but Lord, please have mercy. Shall one man sin, and will there be wrath with the whole congregation? And Moses prays for them. Verse 26. And he spake unto the congregation. This is Moses saying, depart, I pray you, from the tents of these wicked men, and touch not anything of theirs. Get out of the way. And verse 28, and Moses said, hereby ye shall know that the Lord hath sent me. Verse 30, but if the Lord make a new thing, and the earth open her mouth and swallow them with all that appertain unto them, sorry, not too far, anything that appertain unto them, and they go down quick into the pit, ye shall understand that these men have provoked the Lord. Verse 31. And it came to pass, as they made an end of speaking all these words, that the ground clave asunder, massive earthquake, and a massive opening of the ground, and that was under them, and the earth opened up her mouth and swallowed them up and their houses, and all the men that appertained unto Korah and their goods. Wow! God dealt with the problem. That was not what Moses prayed for, but that was God's answer. God will always do what's right. Moses just prayed for justice. He desired mercy. He wouldn't have desired that to happen. He desired mercy. But he left the rest with God. And sometimes you just need to pray, Lord, don't let the wickedness go unpunished. Why? Not so we can triumph with the wicked being destroyed. No! So that those who are being influenced by the wicked will not be hurt. It's good prayer, isn't it? Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Father in heaven, help us to learn from Moses. And I pray you bless your word. I pray we will learn to be like him. And pray for justice and desire justice in Jesus'